begin with feminine presence. The feminine presence, pages 154 to 158.
So I want to preface this by saying that I have not studied Levinas much at all. Maybe 4 weeks total. You know this.
You mean over 5 years if you distill the moments of study.
Okay, so for me, when I was going through the section on feminine presence, I was noticing a series of tensions. So on the one hand, I was looking at femininity as it was linked with the female, because he does mention woman, and then towards the end, he makes it clear that it's not necessarily just the feminine sex. So I noticed this tension between femininity as something female, and then femininity as this sort of androgynous principle that's operating at the same time. And then the other tension for me that was kind of operating was the idea of intimacy versus separation. And I don't think I fully understood separation and how it's operating, and that was one of the questions I had about the section. But something that I noticed was that, and it was primarily the section where he's making a reference to Buber. It's on page 155. And he says, the I thou in which Buber sees the category of interhuman relationship is the relation not with the interlocutor but with the feminine alterity. And I know from having looked at Buber that the I-thou relationship is something very intimate, and there's a personal connection there, which, as I understood it, Levinas doesn't have the same kind of intimate relationship that Buber's intending to be there in terms of touch, like a connectedness that way. This is what I was thinking. So I was thinking that we could read some of the sections that I thought were potentially important and then discuss them. So the first thing that I was thinking was on page 154 where he mentions recollection. So recollection, in the current sense of the term, designates a suspension of the immediate reactions the world solicits in view of the greatest attention to oneself, one's possibilities, and the situation. It is already a movement of attention free from immediate enjoyment, and no longer deriving its freedom from the agreeableness of the elements. I noticed that recollection was important for femininity, and I think it connects to... Are you lost? Sorry, I thought you were asking me.
No, but you said reflection? Reflection was important?
Recollection.
Oh, yes, recollection. Okay.
Recollection.
Yes. I didn't hear it.
But I'm not exactly sure how it was operating, and that was one of my questions, was why is recollection important? I understand that it's connecting to welcome, the idea of welcoming, and I understand that the feminine is located in the home, and that it's this source of a welcoming principle that remains in the home. Is this right?
Yes.
But I'm not sure
I think it's
why it's important.
Well, why it's important?
Why recollection?
Because recollection requires there to be a place of safety and security to recollect within. Recollection is, remember, motivated by the fear of the morrow, the insecurity of enjoyment, so that we are enjoying our needs, but we're also needy, so that I am concerned where my food is going to come from. I am concerned that the sun is too bright and it's going to scorch my arm. I have to protect myself from the very things that I'm enjoying. So this is the sense of recollecting. I have to gather myself together somehow, deal with this elemental in a way beyond the simple bathing in its pleasures, in which case I will die. It's not enough to bathe in the pleasures of the elemental. And even, remember, once the elemental is set up as separation as enjoyment, I will enjoy all the things I do to recollect myself, so I can enjoy the hammer, I can enjoy thinking, I can enjoy being at home, but it's a different movement of self-protection, you might call it. And Levinas is hopefully not, this phenomenology of cognitization. He's not doing something like you would see in Spencer, where you're appropriating from an interpretation of Darwinian evolution, an account of human subjectivity. He's presumably responding to the phenomena of human worldliness, of bodily engagement in the world, and it's two sides: free-floating, enjoying, and self-protecting, caring for the future, that temporalization of time. So when you say why it's important, first of all, we could, in a certain way, phenomenologically set aside any questions of why, right? When I say in a certain sense, because insofar as ethics will come back into play, those questions are meaningful. Why questions are meaningful, right? Because we have priorities. We are concerned with justice. We are concerned with the suffering of the other. So when I ask, why would I do this? I want to put it in the context of my care for the other and my concern for the society at large. But in terms of why, regarding the very structure of an embodied subjectivity, that question, we're just trying to go with the phenomena. We want to, how are the phenomena presenting themselves to us? And so Levinas notices this second dimension of separation, protection. That's how I would answer it. But the feminine is inseparable from the dwelling. The dwelling is the feminine. The feminine is the dwelling. Femininity is, not femininity, the feminine is this sense of security, this safety blanket, this resting place, this internal gathering.
And the ultimate expression of the other?
It's not the ultimate expression of the other, it's the muted presence of the other. So that Levinas's philosophy is thick, it's rich philosophy, it's a phenomenology. So the other is not only this because we're not even going into, because it's just too difficult, section 4 on eros, like you talk about touching.
Yeah.
There's an entire relationship to the other of physical intimacy and maternity literally, not maternity metaphorically, and paternity and filiality, and these are very concrete determinations of the individual that is separated. And as I said earlier, I have trouble integrating this into my whole picture of Levinas. These are difficult passages, but so far the best answer I can come up with is the one I'm giving you now, is that these are respecting the phenomenology of the separate being that we are. That it would be a truncated phenomenology to leave out eros, and it would be equally truncated to leave out this notion of a place of gathering. So because to protect ourselves, we need property, we need possessions, we need things. And then we'll see we need to represent those things too. Anyway, that's maybe other people have a different answer. That's how I would answer it.
I find this concept of recollection interesting because it somehow doubles the idea of enjoyment in life. So in order to really be able to understand this enjoyment, this is the first response to life, enjoyment. Mm-hmm. But recollection comes to affirm this enjoyment. So I am becoming aware of being enjoying life. I'm becoming aware of myself as interiority. So here is a moment of reflexivity in place. So first we have the sensibility, the pure sensibility, and then comes recollection as a way to bring this reflexivity on a higher level. So I'm aware of the fact that I enjoy. I'm aware of my needs. I'm aware of the kind of being I am.
I would only qualify what you said correctly, that you're emphasizing the word aware, but for Levinas, there's going to be two dimensions of this recollection. One is going to be labor, possession, and the other one will be self-consciousness, representation. So just as Heidegger understands that there's signification in the ready-to-hand, it's not in ignorance, unless our only standard is a certain kind of knowledge. There is an awareness in this practical relation to the world. It's just not representational awareness. But the general structure of it is the same. It's a recollection, yes. Interesting point too, now that we've said this, that unlike Heidegger or Marx, Levinas does not derive one from the other. It is both of these things have to occur in recollection. It will be an awareness of recollection, of reflexivity in a strong sense, and there'll be this practical reflexivity owing to embodiment. but that's how I sort of qualify it with awareness. Because Levinas will use the word attention. And when he uses the word attention, he's thinking about our relation to the other. There's a stronger relation to the other. Because he always characterizes that in terms of wakefulness, vigilance. And it's clever because the wakefulness, we all know that Kant saw himself as having awoken from his dogmatic slumbers. Levinas wants us to understand awakening from the Kantian enlightenment, right? We have to awaken from what Kant calls awakening from the dogmatic slumbers. Right? That is a vigilance in relation to the other, rather than a relationship to truth. Awareness is a very broad term, so certainly it's true, but we have to think of it both in terms of labor and theory. Please, go ahead. Ask her.
The idea of recollection, with this idea, there is already at play this sense of a time, a future. But this already occurs in about 150 section of this here in that sense. He mentions the theme of recollection comes forth in the context of the moral, of the concern for the moral. So something like archetypes, or the ontological order, delay. Somewhere it says delay of the spoil order. So it's already a sense of this relation or this concern with this idea of time, concept.
So what are you suggesting then?
Yeah, because Levinas is a very systematic thinker, so I'm not against you, I just...
No, I'm just asking, what is what?
The point, just the sense of time.
Oh, okay, yes, no question, sense of time, yeah. So it's a shift now from the instant that we were talking about yesterday, that you were talking about, to synthetic projective time. Yeah.
Maybe that will add something. Guerriero talks about recollection, and he associates it with ancient Greek thinking, particularly Plato. And he says Greeks were very good in understanding that you have to recollect the past in order to be self. But he says they forgot that you have to live forward. So he uses this duality, which in order to be an ethical self, you have to have both. And that includes time, definitely. Recollecting backwards and collecting all the past as representations. Also living forward in terms of making ethical choices, ultimately. And I think that there's something very similar structurally going on in Levinas.
I would put this structurally.
Maybe structurally not.
No, I wanted to say there's 4 types of time. I've already done this, but I'll just try to make it even clearer. There's clock time. That's just public common sense time. It has very little to do with...
it's measurement.
Yeah, it's just measurement. So moving from that, in Levinas you have the time of the instant, which is the happiness of enjoyment, the carefreeness of enjoyment. Then you have the recollection of enjoyment, which is the synthetic projective time, which is what Heidegger and Bergson. And then we're going to see the ultimate structure of time, which will revalue both of these, will be diachronous time. So the time so he's working up to some form of the diachronous time in the muted presence of the other as the feminine. So it doesn't jolt us, because what jolts us is the ethical obligation. Whereas I'm not in relation to the feminine in terms of ethical obligation. I'm in relation to the feminine in terms of a place to secure my life and my possessions. A place in which my syntheses can be successful. I'm thinking. So I'm just saying for ourselves to concept, if we keep these 4 types of things in mind, it'll be easier for us, I think, to talk about that most important topic in Levinas' time, right? Because he has an original theory of time. It's the only other one besides Heidegger. and slash Guerriero has slash Bergson. So here we're dealing, I think, with his account of the ecstatic projection time, which would be different than Heidegger's, although its structure would be similar. Yeah. But then the issue of this other layer, this layer down here of the saying, which is maybe really is the ground of this, everything gets shattered. But and I said this before, I know I'm repeating myself, I apologize, but by having established the self as self-sensing, it never gets absorbed, right, by the rupture. That's what he's after. He has to have radical atheism, he has to have radical separation. Right? So these syntheses can somehow manage, even though they are conditioned or unconditioned, toppled, as it were, by saying. One can refuse saying. One can always refuse saying. You can't eliminate saying, but you can refuse it. That is, we can be bad, and we mostly are.
And that's a question of choice.
That would be
Ultimately.
actually that would be another way of thinking of freedom. That would be another kind of freedom. Yeah. That is to, and that's the temptation of temptation. I will maintain my freedom regardless of my obligations. Right? These obligations are not on my shoulders. So let's. Is it other?
Yeah,
I
I
have.
just want to a precision that the vocabulary, the word recollection, we're talking about. In English, does it mean to retrieve something from the past, or?
It has that sense of retrieving from the past.
Okay. Because it doesn't mean at all. It's recueillement in French, and it's not at all the same thing.
But it also has recollection in the cool, what we would say, there's a phrase in English from advertising, but cool, calm, and collected. And that sense of collected means the sense of self-possession.
Okay.
And that would be closer to what you want to say, I think. Yeah.
Nothing.
So it's a good point. We should not be because recollection in English is synonymous with remember.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
It doesn't mean
Recollect is to
remember at all.
Right. So we should probably think more of collected, in the sense of cool,
more-
calm, and collected.
Well, yeah, more gathering everything together.
Etymologically, it's
Because it's not at all.
to get everything back again, to
Pull yourself together.
Yeah,
Pull
but
yourself
the syn-
together.
Yeah,
That's right.
But the synonym is to remember. No? That's,
Yeah. So that's a good point. So we should not be misled to it being memory. Right. It's self-possession.
Yes.
Right. And that is in that English with collective. What was the place for that?
Not about recollection, something about feminine.
It's okay.
Right.
No.
While you progress, I think. While your presentation progresses, I will.
Okay, no problem. So the next thing that I wanted to do was this, on 155, it's the second paragraph, and it's where he introduces woman. We read it earlier, but, and the other whose presence is discreetly in absence, with which has accomplished the primary instead of a welcome, which describes the field of intimacy, is the woman. The woman is the condition for recollection, the interiority of the home, and inhabitation. So, from what I was understanding is that the woman is also in the home, attached to the feminine, not necessarily to feminine, but in this instance attached to it. And that's where you find the dwelling. That's where you collect your things and keep your possessions. No.
I'm glad you went back to this, because right before that sentence, he says, well, it's such a long sentence, I only want to read the ending here, but for the intimacy of recollection or self-possession to be able to be produced in the koinonia of being, the presence of the other must not only be revealed in the face, which breaks through its own plastic image, that's the full sense of the face, but must be revealed simultaneously with this presence in its withdrawal and its absence. Right? So it's a simultaneous presence and absence, a face that is breaking through, but withdrawing from the breaking through. So my initial thought was, oh, it's in a reference to Heidegger again. But then when I got to page 176, on the bottom of page 176, Levinas is referring to Freud. And he says, the other signals himself, but does not present himself. The work, he's talking about the work. The work symbolizes him. The symbolism of life and labor, so it's not just labor, it's life, symbolizes in that very particular sense that Freud discovered in all our conscious manifestations and in our dreams, and which is the essence of every sign, its primordial definition. It reveals only in concealing. So that the sign makes sense within a differential play of signs. Right? So the sign is as much concealed as revealed at the level of the sign itself. The work both reveals and hides the person who makes the work. And the work, unlike, well, Igor will get to this when he does labor, but the work, unlike the face, doesn't come to its own rescue, right? So other people can interpret it. But I'm thinking when he talks about this revealing and concealing, instead of Heidegger, he might be thinking then of the notion of the symbol in Freud, in terms of the discrete presence of the face of the...
I think he minds both.
I think both are
yeah,
important.
because this is a Heideggerian idea that the sign both discloses and conceals. Because what does it mean that discloses? It means that the sign leads you to something. It shows you something. But in the same time, the sign conceals itself as a sign and conceals that which signifies in itself. So when I see the sign, I don't see that thing, the words the sign points out, but I see the sign. And the fact that I see the sign blocks me to see that thing, the words it signifies.
Okay, but I'm thinking the Freudian addition to that is that, think of a Freudian slip, the way something accidentally said reveals something that you didn't want to be said. And I'm thinking that's the sense that he's thinking here, that it reveals without any deliberate intention.
Slip of tongue.
Slip of tongue. So this thing, the woman, which is discretion, it says and the other whose presence is discreetly in absence.
So it reveals itself by concealing itself. The moment of concealment is more powerful than the moment of revealing itself.
Let's ask ourselves, what is absent? What is absent in the discrete presence of the feminine? And I'm thinking what's absent is this sense of ethical opposition.
It's the face.
Yeah.
The face is
The
not present.
face is absent. So it's a face that's not fully a face. So it has gentleness, because we would say it's non-judgmental, right? Isn't that the way we put it today? You know, stop being judgmental. So you can go home to the one you're trusting and intimate with, and in the eyes of the world, you're one thing, and you want her to cut you a break, right? Non-judgmental. I'm thinking this might have to do with the fact
Well,
that...
this, the end of the paragraph,
Yeah.
He returns to the image he uses, well, the contrast he uses between Abraham and Ulysses and Odysseus. This is on page 176. To be
Yeah.
expressed in one's life by one's work is precisely to decline expression. Labor remains economic. It comes from home and returns to it. The movement of Odyssey, you know, his use of Odysseus is he doesn't really get anything from going out in the world. He just wants to go home.
Right,
It's
it's
an
back to
adventure.
himself. Right.
You know, nothing is, he hasn't been altered by a relation with the other. He just returns home. So, you know, that's what's happening here too. You go home to collect yourself together again. It's your dwelling. It protects you against the world. As you know, what you were talking about. It's almost like the ideal 50s wife. You know. I don't know if anybody ever watched Leave It to Beaver, the American sitcom. Ward Cleaver goes home. and June is there to welcome them.
But isn't there, don't we find this in friendship also, despite Aristotle? I say despite Aristotle, because for Aristotle, a true friend does believe, but he judges you well, and you judge him well, because you both deserve to be judged well, and for that reason you have friendship. But I'm saying, despite Aristotle, we also know of a notion of friendship where you can trust the other to break the law, trust the other to do the evil, right? Where this is a partnership of two, right? We expect when the son goes out and commits a crime or a murder and he goes home to his house that his mother will not turn him in, right? On the other hand, I mean, in certain cases you want the mother to turn him in. In America, there was this case of the Unabomber who was sending bombs in the mail to people that couldn't find it for years and years and years until finally his brother recognized the character of his writing in a manifesto he had sent out, and he reported to the FBI, and they caught him. And everyone was extremely grateful, right? Because this guy was a terrorist for a long time. But except in those extreme cases, we don't expect the mother to turn the criminal in. Again, counter Aristotle. And we respect this. I think it's this that Levinas, right? This is what Levinas is. Now, is this just an adventure, or is this, I suppose in some sense it is, but why do we respect it? Why do we want it? Why do we need it?
I think we both respect
It's
it
not-
and suspect it, though.
Yes, that's true.
Because it's, you know,
That's true, we
It's
suspect it
close.
too. Yes.
it's, where does he say this? The egoism of love is between two.
Oh, the society of two.
It was society too.
Yeah.
You know, that's what, you know, it's a wonderful thing.
Right.
It has problems.
It does have problems, and yet it's something, would we want to do without it?
Oh, no.
When I grew up during the Cold War, as you remember, one of the things that we were taught that was terrible about the Soviet Union is that children turned their parents in.
We were taught that as well, yeah.
We thought that you should turn your parents in. Right. Okay, so our propaganda was right. Yeah, right. But we use this to think that what a horrible society. How can anyone live in such a way? And that was also the horror.
Unless your
in
parents
Orwell's-
were communists.
Oh, you have to turn them in. If your parents are communists, you turn them in. Right. But in Orwell's 1984, think about Orwell's 1984, what's missing? The home. The home is what's missing. The feminine presence is what's missing. There is no retreat from the world. There is no self-possession in that world. Everything is exposed. Everything is open. So you would think, oh, this is the most ethical, the most just society, and yet it's the most tyrannical and dehumanizing and dehumanized society.
This is precisely because we need this moment of being home, of being concealed from the world, in order to be able to open up to the world,
Yes.
in order to be able to have ethical relationships, to enter into this transcendental relationship to the other.
Mm-hmm.
So we need this mother, we need this feminine home in order to be able to be humans in this sense of relating to the other.
Levinas is distinguishing the private sphere from the public sphere, and he's doing it in a non-capitalist way. The private sphere is simply not my sphere of economic self-interest. It's the sphere of my protection, my comfort, my at-homeness with others.
It's just about this turning in. We said, we don't expect that except in the extreme cases, and it's a bit problematic because
It's difficult.
it's how do you decide when the case is extreme? I think we should go a bit further, maybe be a bit more radical and say it's actually these two spheres, what you just said, they are just separate, and we can't, we can't never say when mother should turn in her son. We can't. It's
I agree with you in this sense that completely I agree with you.
we can't make a rule.
Aristotle distinguishes decency from justice.
Yeah.
Right? And this is exactly the case where no universal rule can apply.
Yeah.
Right? There can be no rule. So it requires a very difficult freedom. It requires discretion, personal judgment. And Levinas doesn't want to eviscerate the world of this. This is, it's cleaner and easier to wipe out that sort of thing. It's more rational in the Weberian sense. But this is what life is made of. This is the orphan and the wolf of real life. So these kind of difficult decisions. In America, I know you all heard this, American news is now global news, this business of the killing of those children. The Boston Marathon, the explosions. So when this occurred, no one really knew what it was about and why someone would do such a thing. And then as they pieced it together very quickly, they found those two brothers. And on the radio in America, they quickly found the sister, I think, was it their sister or was it their parents' sister?
No, the sister was somewhere in Canada
in New Jersey, and the sister wouldn't speak about it, but they had an uncle, and the uncle got on the radio, and he just denounced it. He said, "You have ruined our family name," and everyone was thinking, "That's great. That was great that he said that. He understood that, how to make these decisions about what was what. That is, this had gone so far beyond the bounds that it was not difficult for him to make that distinction. On the other hand, I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, I can't speak for the whole country, but I respected the sister also. I thought she given her privacy. I thought the mother was the nutcase, the one in Russia who was saying it was a conspiracy, it didn't happen, but the world is filled with these conspiracy people. You were handling?
About the feminine, we get different ideas about the feminine in Levinas in various places. Of course, he differentiates it from women, but still it is somewhere connected to women also. In Time and in the Other, he talks that the alternative of the other appears in its most radical dimension in the feminine. There Levinas seems to equate it with man-woman love, and at that
With what?
man-woman love.
Oh, okay.
And at that time, he speaks this as the highest ethical moment, ethical act. But when in Totality and Infinity, towards the end, he speaks about again the feminine, other than the context you are speaking about, is in the section called the Phenomenology of Eros, where he speaks about the feminine. And there also it is something connected with man-woman love. But at that moment, he no more considers this as an ethical, but he looks at it suspicion, the ethical element in it, and he says that carnal passion is involved in it. So one has to move away from that, the feminine, and ethical is different. And here where you speak,
Yes.
and it is their feminine is looked at as enjoyment of the elements, and there also woman is lurking in the back.
Yeah.
That is good. I don't know how to reach a final idea about the
difficult.
feminine from this or these various contexts. Probably Professor Richard may help.
Yeah.
Sure. If I can get to, I think it comes to a very important question. In the early Levinas and Time and Other, the feminine is presented as a radically the program other. Whereas in Totality and Infinity here, it seems that the feminine is is needed as a home in order to be open. I think this is exactly the feminist critique about us. So this is a very, I think it's very difficult question. So how can we understand this, can I say it's a kind of shift of thinking in us from the other period to eternity and infinity? Or we can interpret this as kind of apparent difference other tools. So I think we can still think about it.
I agree with you that there are 3 pictures, but I don't know enough to be able to sort out which picture is going to show up. I read a little bit of the feminist critique of his idea of the other. I actually read your paper on it, yeah, which I enjoyed. And then I read a little bit of Simone de Beauvoir in The Ethics of Ambiguity and Second Sex. Yeah, I read a little bit there, but I don't know enough to tell you which one is the dominant one or which one's going to show up. But
I wrote this long article on this topic,
Eros,
the
right?
metaphysics of gender, in my first book, Elevation. And no feminist has ever responded to it. So I don't know what the feminists would say about it. I just haven't gotten a response. I admit that if we can't use words like feminine and masculine, then maybe not shouldn't use these words. But I tried to explain as best I could the phenomenological character of the use of these terms in Levinas. And I gave it my best shot, and I haven't heard any answers. I don't know what to say. Did you read that? Was I wrong? Was I nuts? I thought I just tried to distinguish these realms of signification, the public and the private, and he attaches the classes of distinctions. Maybe he shouldn't, he perpetuates them, but he qualifies that it's not biological, and maybe that's not good enough anymore. I know he got trashed for it, there's no question about that, but I don't know what else to do.
I personally don't see the ground for feminist critique.
There.
There are many reasons for that, but I just don't want to.
Right. Okay.
So I don't know how to answer. I'm sorry. I know that at the end of the section on it starts at the bottom of 157 and goes over 158. That's where he makes it really clear that the differences. So you can read it. It starts. I'll start here. So. Need one add that there is no question here of defying ridicule by maintaining the empirical truth or counter-truth that every home in fact presupposes a woman. The feminine has been encountered in this analysis as one of the cardinal points of the horizon in which the inner life takes place, and the empirical absence of the human being of feminine sex inner-dwelling in a wise affects the dimension of femininity which remains open there as the very welcome of the dwelling. It's really the only answer that I can see, that I know of, to give you.
Well, I have a short question related to this problem. We learned yesterday that love of enjoyment constitutes the I as being at home with itself. That in enjoyment, the I is at home with itself. This, I'm pretty much paraphrasing Levinas.
Yeah.
Now we learn that the feminine defines this dwelling. How do you bring together these 2 aspects of
I go back to what I included in one of the 8 difficulties of understanding Levinas, is that don't get caught in a technical vocabulary. So when he talks about at home in terms of enjoyment, we have to read everything else he says in terms of the carefreeness. Whereas when he's talking about at home, it's actually much closer, less metaphorical in terms of the feminine and dwelling, because it's a place of possession, it's protection. So I'm just saying, we can't obsess on the use of the word at home. And I think Levinas is constantly reminding us not to get trapped into formal logic. And after all, his entire discourse is an attack on the coagulation of the said, or what he calls the ceremonies of the said. And I think this is a perfect case that we understood, I hope, in our discussion, in our reading, what he meant by at home in terms of the happiness of enjoyment. And now we're using the same word, but we're talking about something a little different. That's all. That's how I would. Yeah, I would. There's a certain form of almost anal retentive scholarship, and it comes from biblical scholarship. Which is the paradigm of all scholarship, because if God wrote the Bible, then every word is meaningful, and there's no repetitions. Was he a bad editor? So we have this paradigm, which is beautiful, and helps us understand things, but when it's misapplied, for example, to say reading a newspaper, we really are going to waste a lot of time. So and then you say, well, what's your standard for that ultimately? And the standard for that ultimately is the sensitivity of your own intelligence. And I just don't know how to go further than that. I don't know what to say, finally. There's no ultimately compelling way other than the passivity of discoursing back and forth and question and answer and explanation and understanding. And if it doesn't work, you finally say, I'm sorry, that's the best explanation I can do. I know when I was doing my Living Now seminar, students would the 3-year thing I was doing at North Carolina, I was so happy when James was in the class, because sometimes I would reach a point with my students, I just could not convey what I wanted to say, and Jim would step in and come up with another way of explaining it that worked. And that's so great, it worked, right? But each of us reaches our limit, so I can't stop someone from taking the word at home from that phrase and treating it as if Levinhouse made a mistake because he should have used at home in this part. I'm saying, my response is, this is compulsive reading. Are you trying to learn or not? Are you here to play games or not? That's why for me, Derrida is mostly playing games. Because I don't see the payoff of these readings. You go on and on, 30, 40 pages, and you walk away with nothing. Whereas I can go on with one paragraph of every now, so my life can be changed. That's what I think happens. It's funny, because writers will often say this. I know Maimonides says that he doesn't have an extra word in any of his writings. It's nonsensical. It's ridiculous. Because he does. He's filled with extra words. Right? For those of you who read, what was it Steppenwolf or Magister Louis from Hermann Hesse, where he has this image of musicians in heaven, and they are trailed by the extra notes that they wrote. That is, so the greatest of musicians like Mozart is free to walk on his own, but other musicians like Wagner, there's this train of hundreds and hundreds of notes because they were extra notes, and so true. The great writers, like the collected works of Spinoza, are the 2 tiny little volumes. Right? The entire works of Bergson is 1 volume. Right? And he wanted everything else destroyed, and they didn't. So now there's a 2nd volume. Right? And then Heidegger, oh my God, and Husserl, oh my God, it's unending. Right?
I don't think that's Husserl or Heidegger's fault.
No, they were scientists.
As much as scientists wanted to publish everything they ever.
Well, not Husserl. I mean, he didn't publish everything. He just preserved it. Yeah, but he published very little of what he had written.
Then Heidegger too published very little in the course of his life. But then the scholarship came and wanted to see everything, to publish every letter, every lecture and so on. And yet now you're stuck with over 120 volumes.
I know it.
That's why we are here.
And what you have
We're here because this is the published text. This is the text.
What you said is not quite correct. Actually, Heidegger himself, in his life, while he was still alive, he edited. He gave the title to all the volumes of his Gesamt Ausgabe, which is 102 volumes.
That's true.
So it is not that the editors did the job for him. Heidegger himself, he has this very explicit, very clear plan to have all whatever has written
Well, it,
But after his life.
it's not exactly like this. The fact is that the people came to him and said, we want everything what you've written to be published. And he didn't agree at the beginning with it. And he said that these are not words. The motto of his Gesamtausgabe is Wege, not Werke. This is roads, not works.
That's in
So-
1962.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is that you're right in saying that Heidegger programmed everything, but this is because he wanted, if it's gonna be made, I want it to be made so, the way I want it to, so that I'm not gonna be misunderstood and so on.
I'm not blaming that. I would give priority to the works that were published under his imprimatur during his lifetime. That's what I would say. I would not get swapped by this gigantic 120 volume.
But there are a lot of volumes that are just connected from the notes of his students, volumes who he didn't even think about their existence.
So Heidegger himself, he always revised his manuscript. He edited his manuscript with his brother. Before as voting for Heidegger or for his mom.
So can we go back to the,
Let's go back. So, okay, that was a very long answer to your question about the use of the word "at home" regarding the enjoyment. That if we're sensitive to it, we still see the difference between the carefreeness of the first moment of enjoyment and the recollection of subsequent developments of enjoyment that lead to Levinas's notion of worldliness, of the world. So let's stick with the family because it is it's a difficult idea.
I think that's everywhere that I wanted to go.
What?
I didn't want to go anywhere.
Okay, so we're done?
I'm done.
no,
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Should we take a 5-minute break or just go right to the next one?